Sacred Sites with Steve Ray, here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
The place where the multiplication of loaves and fish took place, it's a long way because we're leaving the primacy of Peter from yesterday. This is still the end of the first full day of a pilgrimage, and we are now leaving the primacy of Peter, which we talked about last 2 weeks, and we have a long, only 4-minute drive because it's just from one parking lot to another. So I said to everybody, don't get settled in on the bus. Just kind of sit down and get ready to jump up again. And we pull into it's called Tabga, and I'll explain that in a minute. And we pull into the parking lot, and it's just a small one. You have to pay 100 NIS to get in this parking lot. That's new Israeli shekel. It costs 100 in new Israeli shekels to get in. And it's just a small lot. It holds 30, 40 buses. And when we get off the bus, the first thing is there's this little Arab Muslim woman, and she's our friend, and her name is Nami. And she lost her daughter a while ago, and she also had a knee replacement like I did. So we always, first thing when she sees us, oh, Mr. Steve, Mrs. Janet, and she hugs us, and we talk about her knee and all this. It's really wonderful to have these people that you see time and again and become familiar with. But as we walk in, we see a big sign, and it's a big Greek word, heptapagon. And then it's in German because this is a German Benedictine church and a shrine here. And heptapagon means 7 warm springs, which is why the fishing is all done on the northwest corner of the Sea of Galilee, because these 7 springs come rushing into the lake from the shore. And even Egeria, who was there in the 380s, who was a Spanish nun who went and wrote a journal all through the Holy Land as she went through. She explained how these 7 springs poured water into the lake and how that attracted the fish, which is why that's where Peter, Andrew, James, and John were always doing fishing right along this shoreline. And you can still see sometimes it's kind of fun. We're going and walking along the shore, and I see one of these big waterfalls pouring in off the hill, and all the little Arab kids in there splashing and playing in the warm springs. But that's what heptapagon means, and it has been corrupted. I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's been shortened in an Arab form, and it's now called Tabga. And Tabga is a shortened form of heptapagon, so it's a shortcut for those 7 springs. And so as we walk through, as always, I tell people they got to use the toilets because I know that this has got to be a real pilgrimage. Tim tells me, the producer here, that it's got to be a real pilgrimage. You got to make people feel like they're really on the bus. So there's a big gate, and you got to pay money to get in there. And it's a German place, so you can imagine it's not, it's a big German, like a big gate, and the money and everything. It's difficult to get in anyway. But so everybody uses the restroom, and then we go into heptapagon. The first thing that we see as we come in is it's a German Benedictine abbey, and it's tied to the Abbey of the Dormition on Mount Zion in Jerusalem. These are together. The big one is in Jerusalem, where the Dormition of Mary. We'll do that one down the road, where Mary fell asleep or died. And this one is attached to it, and it's also by the German Benedictines, but it celebrates the multiplication of loaves and fish. And about 8 years ago or so, time flies, but we got there one time and we couldn't go in because these radical Jewish settlers had set the place on fire. And so it was about 2 years before we could actually return to this place after they rebuilt it. And it was really sad, but things like that happen. Now, one of the things that there are big signs in the front as we come in. There's one, and the one big one, it tells the whole history of this church and of that site. And it shows that it goes all the way back to the very first centuries. That people, even on the sign, it says 28 AD to 350 AD. So, well, Jesus wasn't crucified till 33 years old, but it says since 28 AD, people have been coming there because the calendar changed. But people have been coming to this place to remember the multiplication of loaves and fish. This isn't something that we pilgrims going back just discover, let's find a place and let's call it, let's say this is where it was. This is really where people have been going from the very beginning. And there is a big rock on the site where the very, very first Christians said Jesus put the loaves and fish as he was multiplying and handing them out. Now, there's big signs in the courtyard, and one of them starts at 28 AD and shows the progression of the churches and the worship that took place there. And so we go through and explain all of that. And then the second sign that we see is it's a big map, and it describes all of Jesus's ministry in this area. So we're going to spend a lot of time in the next few days in the Galilee area. So this sign is really nice for our group because it's really the first time we hit the Sea of Galilee and start going around it. And we start out with this big map, and it shows all the places where Jesus was, where the multiplication of loaves was at least twice. He did it at least twice, but we'll get to that. And so this sign's very nice. So we explain all those areas where Jesus was. There were no churches built there until 313 because after Christianity was legalized, it was built later in the 4th century, the first ones. And the first church was built over this rock where Jesus placed the loaves. Here's what the Egeria, the pilgrim, says. And I don't usually read a quote here, Nick, but that's what I think is so significant. And it's from the year 380 AD. That takes us way back to the beginning. It says, by the sea is a grassy field with plenty of hay and many palm trees. Those are date palms, by the way, where you get the dates. By them are 7 springs, heptapagon, each flowing strongly. And this is the field where the Lord fed the people with the loaves and the fish. In fact, the stone on which the Lord placed the bread has now been made into an altar. And we can go right up to that altar today when we go in the church. We'll talk about that in a minute. But they have it roped off. When we started going there, Nick, 30 years ago, you could walk right up to the stone and touch it and crawl under the altar. Not anymore. It's all roped off. And a guide can lose his license if he lets people go beyond that rope to go touch that rock. We had somebody try to do that in our groups, and we said, stop, and we grabbed him and pulled him back because this is a serious offense. And why did they rope it off? Listen, even what Egeria says. People who go there chip away small pieces of the stone to bring back home with them for prosperity, and we've heard it's very effective. So in other words, they want a relic. They want a piece of stone, and miracles took place on it. But the stone today is just a little stone rock, part of a little rock, but it used to be huge. But people kept chipping away and taking little pieces home with them. Now, I always encourage people, everywhere we go, pick up a stone, take it with you, make a mark on it, what it is. Those are the cheapest and the best souvenirs that you can get in the Holy Land. There's no cheaper souvenir, and there's no better souvenir than to have a piece of stone that comes from these sites. But don't chip it off the real rock. Pick it up out in the field somewhere or on the shore and bring it back with you. There's no problem bringing it back in your suitcase. So our pilgrims always have very heavy suitcases when they come home because they're full of rocks. But so we go into an olive courtyard. After we explain the church, we go through the gate, and there's a courtyard. And this was almost an exact replica of the church that was there, that was torn down and destroyed in the year 614. It was destroyed and torn down. In fact, they tore down and destroyed all the churches in that whole area. And in the courtyard, there's a pool there with some fish, koi fish in it. Oh, we're out of time already. My goodness. Well, anyway, the olive tree represents the Holy Land. We'll pick up with that next week.
Sacred Sites with Steve Ray is heard live every Monday on the Guadalupe Radio Network program, Morning Joy. For more authentic Catholic content, go to grnonline.com/joy.